I've reached a new stage in the life of a rabbi, which is weddings, doing a lot of weddings. And I have to tell you, it's a good thing. I'm not complaining. I mean, it takes up a Saturday night often, but comes with the territory. But what's nice about weddings is I work with adults, young adults, who actually, believe it or not, they want to be there. The couple getting married, that is. Bar and bat mitzvah kids, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't want to be there. But wedding couples, they want to be there. So a couple of weeks ago, I was officiating at a beautiful wedding. Wonderful couple, they were smart, they were thoughtful, they were competent in their careers. And so under the chuppah, they shared stories of their love and their promises to each other. It was beautiful to hear them open their hearts and affirm their core values there in front of, it was a Persian wedding, hundreds of guests. So what was notable about this couple, and music to my ears as a rabbi, was they promised each other to affirm Jewish values. Now, why was it music to my ears? Because they were taking their Jewish identity really seriously. So much so that they incorporated it into their words in front of all these people. And there was actually a sigh of joy from the crowd as they heard them say that. So that phrase, Jewish values, we hear it a lot, but it begs a pretty powerful question. What exactly are Jewish values? And what do you mean when you say it? What did they mean when they said it? What do I mean when I talk about Jewish values? So I want to explore the phrase and unpack, and this will come as no surprise to you if you know me, its complexity, because that's my mantra. It's complicated. So think for a minute, and don't think so hard that you lose track of what I'm talking about, but think for a minute what you mean when you say the phrase, and maybe even later think about it even a little bit more. How did you arrive at your particular values that you call Jewish? What are the sources? And importantly, are your values static, unchanging? Or as you acquire more wisdom, as you experience more things, as you learn more, do your values also change? So let's consider some sources for that vast thing we call Jewish values. At the center, obviously, is Torah, and by extension, the Bible. Now, I've spent my entire career studying that book. Literally, my entire career. I think I know it pretty well. I think I do. So here's what I've learned. It is full of contradictions. And some of the principles in that book are deeply disturbing, and contrary to our modern standards. For example, capital punishment is commanded for a host of minor offenses that, in all honesty, it's not that we would say, oh, they're minor. They don't even register on our list of things where a person deserves punishment. There is a global acceptance of polygamy and slavery in the Bible. And there is the endorsement in several places of actual genocide. Now, of course, there are many more virtuous principles that we ignore to our, I think, communal peril. Care for the poor, the stranger, the foreigner, the widow, the orphan. The notion of the adherence to a principled legal code that does not permit the whims of a leader to make up laws. Care for the earth and for animals. And at the same time, and it's been said by many before me, one can derive contradictory values for issues that exist in our modern society from that text. People pick and choose. One can make a case for the artificial termination of a pregnancy. One can make a case against the termination of a pregnancy. One can endorse, through the Bible, careful environmental stewardship, but you could also find justification for the exploitation of natural resources. I could argue for the exclusive right of the Israelite Jewish people to inhabit the land of Israel, whose boundaries are expansive and defined expansively in some parts of the Bible. And I could also make a case from the Bible for the coexistence of many cultures within that same geographic area, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it's not surprising, it shouldn't be surprising, that a text which has been written over centuries by a host of different authors should capture and reflect a wide range of values. That shouldn't surprise us. So here's my operative principle when I actually read the Bible or explore a Torah portion for the week. And I think this is the true holiness of the text. That the Torah doesn't necessarily, and the Bible doesn't necessarily give us answers, but it poses core questions, key questions that we need to be wrestling with. It helps us develop our values. But the Torah and the Bible didn't end the Jewish conversation about values, obviously, because for the subsequent, more than 2,000 years that have passed since the Bible was declared finished, Jews have been debating the nature of Jewish values. The Talmud has 2,711 double-sided pages that capture the discourse of the rabbis about those values. Each page is surrounded with commentary, spanning dozens of generations, hundreds of thousands of miles of geographic distance, captured on one page of Talmud, a debate about what the values are. Profound and meaningful dialogues. Things like, what does it mean to own property? What are the boundaries of that property? Who's responsible for damages caused by animals, by negligence, by accidental injury? How should husbands treat wives? How should wives treat husbands? What is charity and how should it be collected? Who should receive it? Those are big questions. And amazingly, and you've heard this, if you've heard some of us speak about the Talmud, what makes it amazing is that there's no resolution often to those debates. They're kind of left with us hanging to try to figure out, what should we do? And the Talmud doesn't answer that question. And it's a classic Talmudic on one hand, on the other hand. We could look at it this way. We could look at it from that side. We could look at it that way. That's Talmudic logic. It's argumentative, it's opinionated, it's contradictory, it's brain exploding sometimes. It's Jewish, really Jewish. And there are legal codes derived from Talmud. My hero, Maimonides, 12th century, he wrote one. Brilliant. And in Europe, not only did they spurn his codes, they burned his books because they disagreed with what he had to say. Who does he think? Macher thinks he can tell us what Jewish values are. Judaism is also renowned for so-called responsa literature. Shailot and Tshuvot, questions and answers. There are centuries of it. It continues even into our time. Reform, conservative, Orthodox, Haredi Judaism all have responsa literature, Shailot, Tshuvot. I have an ethical or a legal problem or a moral problem. I send a letter or in this day and age, or email to my rabbi for a resolution. Sometimes in the ancient world, letters were sent via whatever messenger they used, human or animal, take days, months to go to the rabbi. The rabbi would compose the response. It would take days, months to come back, and it was saved because of the value of the rabbi's answer. Most times, whatever the answer the rabbi gives is binding only on the followers of that particular rabbi, or the rabbi's greatness determines for that rabbi's community. So, for example, polygamy has been illegal in the Ashkenazi community only since the 12th century. It expired, his edict expired in 1987. So have a ball, if you'd like. For Sephardic Jews, it's officially not illegal, technically. So add to that responsa literature, add rabbinic associations who make their decisions about things, schools, rabbinic schools, yeshivot, who have their responses about things, and even some sermons that get promulgated across the Jewish world, these days digitally. But there's one last place where our values come from, which may surprise you, but it's profoundly important for us in this country. And that is the values that we as Jews derive from our encounter with democracy. Democracy. Now, Jews have lived in autocratic, dictatorial societies for generations. At times, those societies were okay for the Jews. We were second-class, third-class citizens. We had status. We were relegated to particular neighborhoods. We had to live in a certain way. We had to dress a certain way. But it was peaceful. That was good enough. But one system of governance, as imperfect as it is, has universally allowed Judaism and the Jews to flourish like no other, and that is Western-style democracy. Now, sure, there have been rough periods. You can point to them. Anti-Semitism has all too often gained a foothold, even in this country. However, in the span of history, in the span of Jewish history, no system of government and the associated values that underlie democracy have been better. None. Democracy has influenced modern Judaism. Reform, conservative, Orthodox, all of us, we have been profoundly affected. And no expression of that democracy has been more influential than this country's democracy. None. And we have to recognize the power of American democracy, because you know this country has been a beacon of democracy for 2.5 centuries. And what we also know about American democracy is that it has evolved over the course of those 2.5 centuries. Let's remember how it's evolved. I'm just going to list a few examples. This country, this democratic country, was founded as a slave-holding nation. But we are not. Now we have equality. We went from male domination to the presence of women in all areas of government. We went from private schooling exclusively, or no schooling, to a vast network of public schools that exists throughout the nation. Sometimes we don't even realize what we have. From isolationism as a country to international influence, a force usually for good, something sadly we seem to be squandering these days. In the words of Yehuda Kurtzer, the president of the Hartman Institute, an opinion piece he just wrote this week, he says, American Jews leaned into the core principles of American democracy as vital instruments to keep us equal, protected, and safe among our fellow Americans. We even went so far as to integrate what we saw as American ideas and ideals into our Jewishness, such that our American Jewish values and commitments to liberalism, that's small l, and pluralism reflect a deep synthesis between American Jewish interests and our understanding of what America was making possible for us. So, let's return to my initial question. What are your Jewish values? Don't just say, I accept them, I accept Jewish values. What are yours? I'd love to hear about it too if you want to email me. Have you determined how you got them? How have you acquired them? Sermons, reading, whose messages resonate with you? What are the major Jewish influences in your life? And then, that's the third question I asked at the beginning, the tough question. How are your Jewish values changing as you evolve as a person? I think it's the most important question, because our values have to be influenced and modified by new circumstances, by new information, by new learning. You see, I am a firm believer that stubbornness and obstinacy is not a Jewish value. Do you strive to be a constant learner? Are you open to new ideas? Do you intentionally explore ideas outside of your comfort zone? Do you engage in thought-provoking conversations and reading? Do you consciously wrestle with difficult dilemmas? Almost universally, when we clergy speak to people who are choosing to be Jewish, they weren't born that way, they're choosing to become a part of our people, they tell us that what draws us most to Judaism is our willingness to embrace questions and to resist dogmatic, inflexible responses. For Jews, questions lead to more questions. That's a given. And sometimes it takes someone looking in from the outside to remind us of what we have. The true wealth of Jewish peoplehood is not just about our loving embrace of the past. We have that. But it's the way that we incorporate that past into our encounter with modernity, and we use that as a springboard from which we grow and we change to fashion our future. Ken Yiratzon. So may it be.